Good day. Welcome to the Canadian Tank Museum, home to the largest collection of operational historical military vehicles in North America. History lives here. Before we begin the show, please listen carefully to the following important safety briefing. Our demonstrations include moving vehicles and battle reenactments. These can be extremely loud. We recommend hearing protection, especially for children. Foam earplugs are available for purchase at the museum gift shop. Blank rounds may be fired during the show. Occasionally, brass cartridges may be ejected and land nearby. Do not touch them and ensure children do not either. They may be hot. The front row of the bleachers is reserved for guests with mobility challenges or small children. Please respect the seating arrangement and move higher onto the bleachers if possible. Please do not stand in front of the bleachers as this also blocks the view of others. Do not climb over, or attempt to cross the fence into the tank arena. Unauthorized entry in the arena will result in an immediate stop of the demonstration. Please do not lean on or hang items over the fence. In an event of an emergency, in the arena, you'll see a red flag. This is a visual signal to all vehicle crews that the arena is vehicle crews that the arena is not safe or that there is a reason to stop the show. Additionally, you will hear 3 long horn blasts like this. This is your signal to immediately follow the directions of the museum staff. Stay seated and remain calm until all clear is sounded by a single horn blast like this. Thank you for your attention and cooperation. Safety is our top priority, and your help ensures that everyone has an enjoyable and secure educational experience. Now sit back, relax, and get ready to experience the sights, the sounds, the rumbles of the military vehicles from our historical past in the Canadian Tank Museum's Tank Arena.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Hey, I don't have to ask a second time. That's amazing. Can everybody hear me down at the far end bleachers okay? Awesome. Everybody at the far and the other end, am I right? Can you hear me down there? Awesome. Thank you for coming today. My name is Jeff Darrington. I'm a volunteer here at the museum. It's odd hearing yourself. That's my voice in the safety talk, and I'm standing here listening to myself, so it's a little odd listening to yourself when you're not actually talking, but I want to make sure everyone is aware we did talk about safety and we talked about ear protection. It's going to be loud. It's going to be hot today, so please stay hydrated. Make sure you drink water. We have a first aid tent over here behind the bleachers by the building. If someone's not feeling well, feeling under the weather, we do have paramedics on site that can tend to any sort of issue. But without any further ado, is anybody ready to get this started? All right, let me just see if we have someone that maybe will listen to the radio. Marshall, bring out the tanks. Enjoy the show. Well, what do you think about that, everyone? All right. Well, to kick things off, if you don't mind, let's start things. If everyone could stand and remove your hats for the playing of our national anthem. Thank you very much. Let's start things off. What I'd like to do is introduce the president of the Canadian Tank Museum, Al Duffy.
Welcome to the Canada Tank Museum's Aquino Tank Weekend. Thank you so much for being here and supporting us. How many people have been here before? Show of hands. I think we're doing something right. We gotta be with you guys coming back. You know, for those of you that may not have been here before, we bring history to life. And we like to say that, but there's meaning. You go to some museums and you can go, you'll see this tank or that tank or a Jeep, and it's sitting in a museum. It's not going anywhere. You don't see it, you don't feel it, you don't smell it, and you're gonna witness all that stuff. You're gonna witness it moving. Did you feel the ground shaking when we have 5 main battle tanks rolling by?
Yeah!
That's incredible, and I hope you enjoyed that experience. I would like to say something out of the gate here. I mean, with what we do here and the reenactments you're going to see, I am strongly not recommending, but stating we do not glorify war. What we're doing here is we are honoring the sacrifice and the service of our veterans and our currently serving military. So could I have a round of applause for all those currently serving and our veterans? Thank you so much, because that is what it's all about here. Now, we couldn't run this organization without people. And we're growing every year, but we now have 4 full-time staff, and our volunteer number is up to 230 volunteers that make this happen. I think we're pretty unique. And of the 230, there's 170 of them committed in helping us put on this Aquino Tank Weekend. Let's hear it for our volunteers. We have a lot of friends that come and help us set this up and put it on. We have people from the UK, Australia, the US, and we even have one gentleman from Berlin. We have, the Canadian Armed Forces has 3 armored regiments. And we're not talking reserves, we're talking armored regiments. And one of them is the RCDs, and they're based out of Petawawa, and they're here today. They have a booth, and they have vehicles with them. Let's hear it for the RCDs supporting us. The second one is the 12th RBC. It's our Quebec group, and they have a booth in the MVCC, and they're from Valcartier. Again, Armored Regiment, Canadian Armed Forces supporting us. Let's hear it for them. The 3rd Regiment is out in Calgary, and well, it's a little too far to haul a tank that far per vehicle, so, but that's great for them. Now, behind the bleachers, I think we have the largest encampment, or plural, encampments. We've got British, American, German, we got Japanese. We even got the Roman 30th Legion out there. There's a Legionnaire with all this kit and unit. You got to get over and see some of this stuff that we have. We got a field hospital set up out there, a variety of vehicles, but I mean, in between the shows and everything, there's so much to see. The MVCC, you go inside, we've got more displays. We have our gift shop there. It all supports us, and get a you know, some kind of a gift or remembrance of this event. We have our static display of guns and uniforms and medals and other military paraphernalia, and that's the Ontario Regiment. We were started as the Ontario Regiment Museum, and then we morphed into the Canadian Tank Museum. But our founding regiment is here, the Ontario Regiment, and it's fully supporting us. Could we have a round of applause for our supporting regiment? Now, those of you that may be into remote tanks, every year we have it. This year they're back again. They take the grass, they cut it down short, they put stuff, and they've got some very realistic remote tanks and vehicles right behind, so please don't hesitate to check that out. So today, you're going to see 2 huge Hollywood-style reenactments. We're talking explosions, pyrotechnics, we're talking the cannons firing. The first is, shortly after this, is World War II Casa Berardi, if I said that correctly, and that's where the Ontars, our founding regiment, was actually involved in the campaign in Italy. You'll hear more about that later. At the far end down there, you'll see a lot of vehicles that are tan. That's our Gulf War display, Gulf War exhibit. And there's nothing like that in the world, nothing like it at all, because not only do we have real Gulf War vehicles that were there in the Gulf War, but we have found the crew that crewed those vehicles 35 years ago. We have brought them over from the UK, once from Berlin, and you can go over there after your World War II show. You got some time, there's rides, there's exhibits. Don't hesitate, don't miss that down there. Talk to the veterans, see the vehicles, see the weapons, and you're going to see this afternoon we have a huge Gulf War show here with explosions and Russian, Iraqi vehicles, and well, again, it's a big spectacular. You're going to see a lot of firing and explosions. Now, how many here have played World of Tanks? Put your hands up. Look at all of them. Well, I'd like to say that World of Tanks is our sponsor this year, and it's World of Tanks Modern Armor. They're one of our sponsors. Let's hear it for them. Now, being the president of a tank museum and having a few tanks, I like to play World of Tanks. I remember when we first got him involved, he said, why don't you come out here and be part of what we do? And that's when they really didn't have an interest. So I thought, well, why don't we set up something? Why don't we create something that is like the game? It's like playing the game, but it's for real, in real tanks. So what you're going to see, for those who haven't been here before, is something we call Battle Royale, and it was modeled after the game World of Tanks. And you're going to see 2 tanks go at it here, and you'll hear more details. I'm just giving you the big picture here, and it's incredible. That's this afternoon. I think it's 2. Check your programs, and it's after that we have the Gulf War. So stick around. Make sure you don't miss any of this stuff, because you don't see this anywhere else in the world. This is so cool. I am biased. But listen, before I turn it over, I want to thank you all so much for being here and for supporting us. Thank you guys so much. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our MC and our Executive Director, Jeremy Blowers.
Well, thanks, Al. We're going to get these tanks off the field and head right into telling stories from our Canadian history in the Second World War. So, again, there's so much to do and see here in the World of Tanks arena this weekend. Two fantastic shows. One more time, let's hear it for these tank crews and for Al Duffy for opening up our show in such a fantastic way. Tankers, tankers, start your engines. So we're going to have these tanks go around one more time for you as we are preparing to tell the story of the Canadians in the Italian campaign in the Second World War. And of course, the Russian tank is far, far down the arena. How you guys doing? Now you can see our crews are highly trained in safe backing and ground guiding. You'll notice throughout the shows, you'll see a lot of staff like myself that are actually communicating with the vehicles with hand signals. Another safety feature that you'll notice is that all the drivers and crew have comms headsets on. So it's a bit like remote control tanks, 1-to-1 scale. Al said there's visitors from all over the world and across Canada, but also I see a special visitor here atop this Chieftain tank. I see our local Oshawa Member of Parliament, Rhonda Kirkland, as a tank commander. Let's hear it for our local MP for coming out to support. Tankers, tankers, roll out. Again, with these 5 main battle tanks rolled past the stands one last time in these opening ceremonies, especially if you're in the lower bleachers, you can actually feel the ground shake of hundreds of tons of armor as it rolls around the World of Tanks arena. Proudly flying the Stars and Stripes, we have the American-built M60A3 main battle tank. Representing the United Kingdom, we have the Mark 11 Chieftain main battle tank. Representing Canada, we have the Leopard 1A5. Tailed by the Berlin Chieftain. That that multicolored chieftain with urban camouflage actually served in the Berlin Brigade and has one of the serving veterans who was there as the tank commander. And then finally, the Soviet-era T-54 main battle tank. So some of the vehicles are going back to their pre-show position. And now we're going to get to the part, if you thought that was loud, now we're really going to open up today's show with a bang. You're going to meet many of the staff here at the museum, the volunteers and the veterans throughout the many shows, and both the morning and afternoon show each day. Now, if you happen to miss the afternoon show today, we are running the same program on Sundays. You can stop back. Even if you just bought a Saturday pass, you really enjoy what you see today, you can come back tomorrow and get a Sunday pass at the gate. So, to open this up with a huge bang, I'm now going to introduce the curator of the Canadian Tank Museum to talk about this piece of equipment that's out in the tank arena. Let's give a warm welcome to our curator, Sam Richardson.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. How are we doing today, folks?
Good!
Fantastic! Welcome to Aquino Tank Weekend. I can certainly assure you that this is going to be the best and greatest military show that you have ever seen, even if I may be biased. That's certainly what I think, and I'm sticking to it. Now, patiently waiting at center field behind me are the 7th Toronto Artillery Regiment, Royal Canadian Artillery's Toronto Limber Gunners. In much the same way as some armored regiments have their own historic vehicle troops that restore and maintain historic vehicles to bring on parades and ceremonies, the Toronto Limber Gunners very much do the same with their cannons and field artillery tractors for their own regiment. Now, the setup that they have in the field is 3 main components. For one, you have a CGT, Chevrolet CGT field artillery tractor, many of which were built in factories like the ones in Oshawa during the Second World War from the Canadian Military Pattern or CMP vehicle class, specifically designed, as the name suggests, for towing large artillery pieces. In the middle, that is somewhat hidden in the grass a little bit, is a small trailer called a limber. Limbers go back to the days of when cannons were towed by horse, and if you were to just try and hook up horses to a cannon and try and tow them with a 2-wheel cannon setup, the cannon would be kind of dragging on the ground behind the horses because they can just pull. They're not lifting and pulling at the same time. So a limber served as a stability device to give the horses a 4-wheel setup that they could just pull, while also being a storage container on wheels for their ammunition. And then, of course, the muscle of the setup, a ordnance quick-fire 25-pounder cannon. And in that name, 25-pounder, that just refers to the projectile that flies out the end of the cannon and does the damage. The whole shell weighs about 34 pounds in total when it's actually packed with TNT and ready to fire. 25-pounder munitions were actually made at a munitions factory in Ajax, a town that's about 15 kilometers west of here, if you're from outside of the area, at a factory called Defense Industries Limited Pickering Works. And there are thousands of people who worked there, many of whom were women contributing to the war effort as bomb girls, as they're often referred to in Canada, or munitionettes. Check out our exhibit inside the building to learn more about their efforts during the war. Now, as for the might behind it, the 25-pounder cannon is an 88mm diameter shell that can go out to a range of over 10 kilometers and cause devastating area damage, especially when fired in large numbers. So who would like to see what this thing can do? All right. Number 1 gun, are you ready? Number 1 gun, open fire! There's the smoking shell that comes out. There are several ammunition handlers on hand along with the gun commander itself, and then the main gunner sitting on the left side of the gun shield who actually aims and fires the weapon. And this is just one of them. A regiment is made up of about 8 of these cannons firing at once. So you can imagine the deafening noise and destruction that would be sent downrange as they're operating. And look at how fast they're going. We're not even a minute in and they're on to their 4th round already. Mind you, of course, this is historic equipment, so it's not as spry as it used to be. Just give them a minute to figure it out. We actually have examples in our collection of an M7 Priest self-propelled artillery vehicle, which British and Canadian regiments used before they acquired these 25-pounder cannons. And despite the power behind these 25-pounder cannons, there was some sadness as they had to let the Priests go. And you can check out an exhibit inside all about the Priest and its role in Canadian service as well. Thank you, Limber Gunners! Let's hear it for them! Fantastic job, Gunners. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, everyone. We got lots more to show you this morning before we get on to the main reenactment. You got some cool vehicles that are going to come around the arena for our next segment called Meet the Tanks. And for that stretch, I'm going to hand you back over to Jeremy, our Executive Director. Back to you, Jeremy.
Thanks so much, Sam. Thank you very much. So we're just marshalling the vehicles. You can see the team in the background. They're marshalling the vehicles for our Second World War segment. The limber gunners are going to limber up their equipment and get safely off the field as soon as they can. So we just have a moment here. You can see in the background there by that sprung shelter where we store a lot of our equipment, you can see the vehicles slowly marshaling up. So as soon as I see them ready, we'll be good to go. So again, I just want to thank our sponsor, World of Tanks Modern Armor. We have 2 members of the Modern Armor team who came all the way out here from Chicago to be at Aquino Tank Weekend. In the Military Vehicle Conservation Center, there's actually a mod tent, a military tent setup where you can go in and you can actually play World of Tanks. You can experience some of the vehicles here in the arena, and then you can try out the game, maybe download it at home and support our sponsor. Other things out in the field, across the field, you'll see some green buildings. Those are actually heritage buildings. During the Second World War, this airfield was actually a Commonwealth training program training airfield for the RCAF. And Canadian pilots and pilots from all over the world came to Canada to earn their wings for the Battle of Britain, for the Second World War, etc. One of those buildings is open. It's the 420 wing. And it's air conditioned, which can be great on a hot day like this. But they have great exhibits inside. They'll be serving food for, they'll have food for lunch with the food trucks around there. And it's also a licensed facility. So you can get yourself a cold pop of your choice throughout the day at the 420 wing. 420 wing will also be running a 50-50 draw throughout Aquino Tank Weekend, with all proceeds going to military charities, both the Canadian Tank Museum, the local cadet corps, and other charities that help Canadian military families. So something you might want to check out. All right, so I'm just going to check on the situation with the marshals. There you can actually see one of our oldest tanks in the collection, 1941 M3A1 Stuart light tank, getting into position there behind the Sherman. The Berliner tank I was talking about. So look at that camouflage on that Chieftain down by the Gulf War. It looks a little odd, right? Most of the tanks that you see here are green, have a NATO camo pattern, are tan. But that was actually developed by the British Armored Corps when they were deployed in Berlin, behind the Iron Curtain. And they were deployed in an urban environment, in a city. So they came up, it's kind of like a dazzle pattern, as you'd see maybe on ships in the First World War. If that tank was parked in a city, in a parking lot behind a building, it would be harder to spot with that strange camo pattern than, say, a green or a tan tank. So it's blocky, and they've picked the three colors that you usually see in a cityscape, with gray and whites for windows and also brown for brick. So very interesting. When that vehicle gets back out on the field, you can actually go up to it and talk to the veteran who served in that vehicle during the Cold War. It's amazing that we were able to track him down, bring him here back to Canada, and reunite him with their vehicle. That's one thing that we really like to do here at the Canadian Tank Museum. Okay, there's a few more minutes. Also, you can see out in the field, we have Emma here from Max Effects. To make history, yeah, let's hear it from Max Effects, and I'll tell you all about Emma and their team. They're actually a professional pyrotechnics company out of Toronto, and they do most of their pyrotechnics for film and television. So how they help us come out here and bring history to life, not just to see vehicles roll around, but when we're going to be telling some historical stories, you're going to actually see and feel explosions. And that is because of Max Effects. So Emma's just out there arming, bombing up the field and making sure that all the show pyrotechnics are safe and ready to go. Not just the tanks, but you're going to see infantry. You're going to see them with small arms and also machine guns. You're going to really feel the concussion of the guns and hear the sounds of the different firearms. And that is all brought to us by Movie Armaments Group, another great company out of Toronto. Let's hear from Movie Armaments Group. So unlike other shows around the world, they actually bring their historical collection of weapons, and of course we're just using blank fire, but that's going to give these historical tales a lot more, first off, pop, but it's also going to give them a lot more realism, and you're going to experience that. So many people and organizations. We have help here from our local Legion, Royal Canadian Legion 637 and Royal Canadian Legion 43 in Oshawa. And of course the 420 wing, which is a veterans association. Yeah, man, you can bomb it up the field. You're all good to turn them on. Not just going to see some military vehicles, and get up close to the ones in the field, but you'll also be able to take a ride if you'd like. If you head to the gift shop, they're actually selling tickets. You can ride in an armored personnel carrier down here at the ride station, and also a M548, what we like to call the battle bus. That's a great ride for children. It's an open-air vehicle. You get to go around the airfield track in a tracked vehicle and really experience what it feels like to be in a tracked armored vehicle. Okay, now I see some of the OP-4 or enemy force German vehicles making their way out. Inside, well, they send out the executive director to entertain while we wait for the tanks, right? So inside the museum, another interesting exhibit you will find is our Project 1918. Now, what is that? That is, we are restoring two vehicles from the Great War, the First World War. We have a tank, an M1917, that was produced in the United States for the First World War. And it's our First World War, our first and our only First World War tank. They're exceptionally rare. There's only 20 of them in the world, and only 3 of those are actually in Canada. And we're also restoring a Nash Quad artillery trailer. So you'll get to see military vehicles that are over 100 years old, and we actually have an active restoration. So whenever you visit the museum at Aquino Tank Weekend or any other time, you can check in with the restoration crew. But because it's such an exciting project, we have started a YouTube series. So if you go to the Canadian Tank Museum's YouTube channel, you can follow Project 1918. We're currently about to release episode 5. We're going to be having an episode once a month for 2 years, so you guys can follow the entire restoration process. Learn more about what it takes to keep these historical military vehicles alive. And something that's even more challenging, not doing something from the 40s or the 70s or the 90s, but fixing and operating vehicles that are over 100 years old. So it's quite a story. Check that out on YouTube at Project 1918. Okay, now I hear the Panzer III coming out. So of course we hope you really enjoy the museum gift shop that's in the Military Vehicle Conservation Center, but there are special commemorative items that are for Aquino Tank Weekend only. And usually on Saturday, sadly, even though we keep on ordering more, the commemorative Aquino t-shirt usually sells out. And we also have a commemorative coin, a challenge coin for Aquino Tank Weekend 2026. So if you're heading over to the gift shop to buy a ride in an M113, look for the Aquino Tank Weekend 2026 commemorative coin and t-shirt. They're definitely the hottest items in the gift shop at these events, and they move pretty quick. Okay, now we have a German STK 251, or that's a Second World War armored personnel carrier, making its way out. I think we're just about ready to go. All right, it seems we're ready to go. So we're going to have a narrated show, but before we actually get into the battle reenactment and the historical story, we're going to show you some of the vehicles and explain them a little bit so you understand better what's happening in the historical reenactment. So we call this Meet the Tanks World War II. Marshal, Marshal, roll out the tanks. So we're going to take you back to the Second World War, over 80 years ago. A conflict that still is defining our time today. Marshal, we're going to scrap the second lap. Due to the delay, scrap the second lap. Marshal, Marshal, send out the Germans. So the first three vehicles we're going to see are vehicles used by the Germans in the upcoming battle. And when we talk about volunteers, you'll notice out in the encampments at Worthington Commons, the historical actors, they are all volunteers as well. And we have over 100 of them that come from all across the province, some of them even from the United States, to bring history to life here and complement the vehicle displays. So coming down the back here, you see the German contingent. Up front we have an SDK 251 Hanamag, or it's a Second World War half-track. Notice that it has a truck wheels on the front and is driven by tracks in the rear. And this is a armored personnel carrier used by the Germans, followed by the Panzer III, which was a standard tank used by the Germans. It was actually designed in 1936 and was way ahead of its time for tank design at the time. And then behind that is not actually a tank, it's a self-propelled gun. It's a Stuggeschütz, or Stug 3, that it was produced to be a tank destroyer. Marshall, send out the next allies. So the Germans are heading to a rear area. Now we're going to have a look at some Canadian military vehicles. So first, used by all Allied forces in every single theater of the Second War, the quintessential Willys Jeep. This one here is a 1941, and this is the grandfather of all SUVs and off-road vehicles, some of them that you may have driven here today in. Behind that is another Canadian military pattern vehicle. This one is a heavy utility wireless. And it was actually just finishing its restoration last year. So Sam talked about a CMP. That's a Canadian military pattern truck. And Canada, believe it or not, produced a massive amount of equipment for the Second World War, with only 26% of it being used by Canadian troops. Canada was arming and supplying all of our allies, especially the Commonwealth allies around the world during this conflict. We produced over 800,000 military vehicles during the war. So this is actually a rear echelon vehicle. It's a heavy utility wireless. This is basically your cell phone. This is a communications truck that has number 19 sets and radio communications inside, so that the troops can report back to headquarters on what their location is and what's going on the battlefield. Behind this, we have a British design vehicle. This is the Universal Carrier, or also more famously known as the Bren gun carrier. It was developed in the 1930s by the British, and when we came to the Second World War, the UK licensed its production to many Commonwealth countries, including Canada. And this particular one was built by Ford in Windsor, Ontario. So a British design vehicle, but built here in Canada. They are such a useful vehicle that the Brits used them up into the 1980s, believe it or not. And being a universal carrier, they could carry troops, they could be used as stretcher bearers or ambulance vehicles, they could pull artillery, they can bring in supplies, food, water, and ammunition. It was just an all-round great little and maneuverable vehicle. And you're going to see that vehicle in action with the others in the coming program. All right, let's roll out. Marshall, send out the reconnaissance troop. A lot of people call the Universal Carrier a Bren gun carrier. As you can see, there's a light machine gun, or Bren, that's outside the front of the vehicle. Now these two vehicles are incredibly special to the Canadian Tank Museum and to our Canadian military history. They are both built in Canada. They are reconnaissance vehicles. And what is a reconnaissance vehicle or a recce vehicle? These are the vehicles that go out front of the fighting forces, and they stick their neck out so they can report back on conditions at the front. What are the enemy positions? What are the strengths? What is the ground like? Is there a bridge? Is the ground too soft for tanks? So the recce units have a very dangerous and difficult job. They have to get ahead of the forces and report back, exposing themselves sometimes to enemy fire. So first, we look at this first vehicle. This is not a dingo. Some of you guys might think, well, that's a British dingo. Well, after Dunkirk and the Brits had lost a lot of their equipment, they looked to Canada as a safe industrial base within the Commonwealth to start producing vehicles. And they asked us to produce some of their type of vehicles. They sent the designs. Well, being Canadians, looking at what we had in our own industrial base with Ford and with Chrysler and General Motors, we took their designs and modified them. So this is actually a Canadian-built Lynx by Ford in Windsor, Ontario. So it's a larger than a dingo, but built on Canadian and US supply parts. And this is a light armored scout car. Now, supporting it is the large support recce vehicle, and this is the General Motors Fox Mark I. And this was produced actually in Oshawa, Ontario, not too far. If you're from Oshawa, where the Costco is downtown, that's actually where the General Motors plant was and where this was built in 1943. The United Kingdom has sent designs over for their Humber Scout car, and we then created the Fox Scout car. It's armed with a 50 caliber machine gun and a 30 caliber machine gun in the turret. Now, what is so special? I said these were incredibly special vehicles to our collection. And this is the first time ever at the Canadian Tank Museum where they're actually on display and operating together. These are not just examples of these Canadian-built vehicles that are in a museum. Both the Lynx and the Fox were actually deployed to the Italian theater in the Second World War. They are veterans. They fought with our forces in the Second World War and were repatriated to Canada by Canadians who thought it was incredibly important to tell this story. Can you believe that? So both of them veterans, both of them having served, and now you can see them here for the first time at the Canadian Tank Museum together in the World of Tanks arena. Let's hear it for the crews of these two amazing pieces of our Canadian military history. The Lynx, actually, that we just acquired, it was restored by a Canadian, Peter Dugan. He's actually driving it right now. And it was acquired by the museum this year in 2026. And the Lynx was repatriated from Italy in 2023, which was kind of incredible. It actually was unloaded here in September 2023 when it was produced in Oshawa in September 1943. So exactly 80 years later, this piece of equipment not only came back to Canada, but to the city in which it was built. All right, now let's have a look at some of the Allied tanks we're going to see in today's program. So coming down the back stretch, we have an American-made tank. Remember during the Second World War, I'm talking about Canadian military production, but the United States, as FDR said, was the arsenal of democracy, using their industrial might to produce many vehicles for all the Allied nations across the world. And this is an American M3A1 light tank. It's the Stuart light tank. It was produced in 1941, and there's a lot of misconceptions about tanks in the Second World War. I mean, we see the movie Fury, we watch a lot of film and maybe even video games. You know, people are always thinking about the Tiger and the Churchill and these larger tanks. But in the early part of the war, 39, 40, and 41, tanks were not as heavily armed or as armored as they were in the mid to late Second World War. You'll see an escalation in the size of vehicles and the power of the firepower they bring to the battle space, and as well as the armor and protection. So here we have a 1941 US-built M3A1 Stuart with a 37mm weapon. And in the early part of the war, that 37mm weapon could take out most German or Soviet or French tanks. It was a very common gun. But later in the war, after 42, it just didn't have the punch to get through the next generation of tanks and was moved into a reconnaissance role, just like the Lynx and the Fox, where they were sent out ahead of the main force to have a look around and report back. But then by later in the war, I mean, we had the Sherman in 1942, but by later in the war, we have this here. This is an M4 Sherman EZ-8, and it is really the pinnacle of Sherman development in the Second World War, with the most armor, the most range, the most protection, and a 76mm main weapon. So, another thing you'll see in the battle, like tanks have many weapon systems. So obviously in the turret that turns 360 degrees, you have the main weapon, so that's for fighting other vehicles and or tanks. This is, in this case, the 76mm. In the front of the tank, you have the driver, and then there's a co-driver over here. And when the vehicles go around, let's see if you can see the bow machine gun. There's actually a machine gun on both of these vehicles that the co-driver can use to clear infantry in front of them. There's a coaxial machine gun in most turrets in tanks, including the modern ones that you saw going around like the Leopard and the M60. The coaxial machine gun is always in line with the main gun. So the gunner can choose to fire off his main anti-tank shell, or he can just use a machine gun, whatever he's aiming at. And then again, in this example here, we also have a 50 caliber machine gun, which you are going to hear very shortly, which is sometimes used in an anti-aircraft role, or what you're going to see today with a dismounted crewman and an infantry support role on that tank. These crews are ready to go. So now we're going to set the scene. Again, I'm going to introduce you to our curator, Sam Richardson, who will be narrating this. He did the historical research behind the story of the Battle of Casa Berardi. We do have some pre-recorded segments, but he'll also be on the mic just kind of narrating what's going on. This is going to be incredibly loud. So those earplugs that were given to you at the gate, this is a good time to put them in your ears if you're worried about hearing protection. It's going to be real cannons firing, real machine guns, real pyrotechnics, and this is the closest that you can safely get to experiencing what our veterans went through during the Second World War. Now let's welcome again our curator, Sam Richardson.
It's the 15th of December, 1943. In Italy, Allied forces are battling fierce German resistance as they advance northward, discovering that the underbelly of Europe is not so soft as their commanders-in-chief had hoped. As winter approaches, tanks from C Squadron 11th Canadian Armored Regiment, the Ontario Regiment, join C Company Royal 22e Regiment, or Vendus, in securing the west flank of the attack on Ortona, where their comrades are trying to breach the eastern anchor of the Gustav Line, a defensive perimeter meant to deter an Allied advance on Rome. In their way stands the German 1st Fallschirmjäger Division, a parachute unit that was among the most tenacious and fanatical units in the German order of battle. For the Ontarios and the Vendus, the objective is to attack and hold a 3-story farmhouse called Casa Berardi, which is located along a vital road connecting Ortona with other German positions inland. With the Führer himself having ordered his forces in the area to hold Ortona at all costs, the Canadian troops could expect nothing less than a fight to the last. All right, welcome to Casa Berardi. This scene is not exactly as auspicious as you might exactly think. The Canadian forces in this context are actually cut off from their own lines, and they're very severely down on both personnel and vehicle support. They're holding on to Casa Berardi as best they can, but with so few of them left, it's getting harder and harder by the hour. On the left, we see infantry coming in from the Royal
initial
Rangers.
attempt to capture Casa Berardi had been challenging, and by 3 o'clock p.m. on the 15th of December, the Canadian forces had been badly mauled. Only 4 of the Ontario's tanks were operational, and the Vendus had only 15 soldiers left active. German forces had cut them off from their lines, with no ability to resupply ammunition or evacuate the wounded. The morning was quiet, leading them to think the German units besieging them may have withdrawn. Little do they know, 200 troops of the German 1st Fallschirmjäger Division lie in wait with tank and artillery support, preparing to launch a vicious counterattack to dislodge them from Casa Berardi for good.
Right, here we have our troops of the Royal UYGLZ on duty here now, and this is oddly one of those cases where in a show context, the number of people you see on the field is almost a 1-for-1 match, as it was in reality. And when you consider that the size of an actual infantry battalion with several hundred soldiers, that is a very scarce and limited force to be holding a vital position with. And to give you some idea of this context, Casa Berardi is sitting along a road linking Ortona inland to other German defensive positions on the Gustav line, which the Canadian forces actually don't know at first. And that's why the Germans are so keen to take Casa Berardi back.
The Canadian defenders are caught by surprise as they are suddenly hit with withering German fire. Despite the intensity, though, they refuse to give ground to the enemy, holding their position with tenacity. A Vendus officer, Captain Paul Triquet, rallies his surviving troops and calls for tank support, making the Germans pay for every step toward Casa Berardi.
Nous sommes attaqués. Envoyez les chars. Oui, monsieur. Ils sont en route.
Although the 1st Fallschirmjäger Division hadn't been involved in actual parachute drops since 3 years earlier, Jaeger troops were well known for being some of the most enthusiastic and fanatical troops of the German army, almost in league with the Waffen-SS in that respect, and they would never give up without a fight, and certainly not when there's 200 against a small 15 with armored vehicle support. We've got a Panzer III just fired at the troops. Medium tank from relatively early on in the war. It's starting to get a bit outdated by this point, but still very much a force to be reckoned with. Their own Allied armor support as yet. Not to mention the Hanameg SDKFZ 251 half-track that is looking for infantry in the background and equipped with a machine gun of its own. The MG-34s and MG-42s mounted on board those vehicles can fire between 900 and 1,200 rounds a minute, respectively. Against these overwhelming odds, the Canadian forces are having to slowly retreat to firmer positions that they can better hold without having to give up Casa Berardi entirely. Just advancing in the background as well is a Sturmgeschütz 3 self-propelled artillery vehicle based on the Panzer III chassis, but designed a little differently. Without a turret, it is actually mounted in a sponson pivot just at the forward end of the hull. Originally used as assault artillery, they were found to have a knack for destroying enemy armor, and they were among some of the most produced German armored vehicles of the entire war. Meanwhile, on the Canadian end, they've even got some of their rear echelon support vehicles in the area. They have the quality wireless that we mentioned earlier. Some of their reconnaissance vehicles, limited mostly to only having machine guns of their own that can put up a fight against the infantry, but certainly can't penetrate the armor of the enemy tank.
They are going to need even more firepower. Major Smith, call sign Peter Roger Charlie 1, gets on. Back at the Ontario's regimental headquarters is his counterpart from the British 392nd Battery, 88th Field Regiment, Royal Artillery, call sign George Peter 2, who relays his instructions to British M7 priest crews to send devastating cannon fire to halt the attack.
Hello, George Peter Able 2-2. This is Peter Roger Charlie 1. The Jerry's are right on top of us and we're about to be overrun. We need fire support now. Please respond. Over. Hello, Peter Roger Charlie 1. This is George Peter Able 2-2. We hear you. Help is on the way. Send fire mission coordinates. Over. Hello, George Peter Able 2-2. We need a 3-1-4-3. Over. Stand by for fire mission. Out. George Peter Able 2-2. Peter Roger Charlie 1. Where's that artillery? Over. Peter Roger Charlie 1. This is George Peter Able 2-2. Here comes the ring. Button up. Get ready to move. Standing by for service. Out.
Just as things are looking pretty hopeless, their old partners, the 392nd Battery, 98th Field Regiment Royal Artillery of the British Army, come through to them and start sending in artillery support to get the Germans to back off.
Ontario's, under the command of Major Herschel Smith, arrive and open fire on the advancing Germans. Their machinery is spare no, cutting down many German soldiers on the open ground. But it is not enough. The enemy keeps coming, an unstoppable force encountering an immovable object. The question now becomes, which one is going to give way first? Captain Triquet was determined to make sure it would be the Germans. Fearlessly encouraging his men through the maelstrom, he rallied them with a statement that is now a key theme of Canadian Army tactics.
Il y a des ennemis devant nous, derrière nous et sur nos flancs. Il n'y a qu'un seul endroit sûr, c'est-à-dire notre objectif.
Finally, the Vengeance can breathe a little sigh of relief as the Ontarios are showing up to offer some more heavy fire support that can deal with the German armored vehicles. The Ontarios were mostly equipped with M4 A4 Shermans at the time, but those were certainly not the only vehicles in an armored regiment. M3 A3 Stuarts could be used as open-top transporter vehicles and machine guns, along with universal carriers. And of course, the reconnaissance elements could join in.
George Peter Able 2-2, this is Peter Roger Charlie 1. Repeat, we are still under fire, over. Peter Roger Charlie 1, confirm you want to repeat the fire mission, over. Yes, fire again now, over. Going. Second fire mission inbound, over.
As the pressure's mounting and escalating on the Germans, they're beginning to take heavy casualties and back off the Canadian forces, especially with the Sherman now advancing on the Panzer III. Cannon weren't enough. Just having 50 caliber and 30 caliber machine guns make them moving pillboxes that are easily going to overwhelm and cut down any infantry left in the open. Caliber machine gun on top of Bart is so powerful that it's actually going to shoot clean through trees and cinder block walls.
George Peter Able 2-2. This is Peter Roger Charlie 1. We're clear. That was quite still. Thanks for the assist, Bill. Always happy to advise. Peter Roger Charlie 1. Out.
Although the Van Dews and the Ontarios had successful was far from over. The two units spent the rest of the day completely cut off from their supply lines, running dangerously low on ammunition. Thanks to the creative thinking of the Ontario Regiment's Captain Leonard Knowles, 7 Shermans loaded with supply crates set off for Casa Berardi at midnight, arriving early the following morning on the 16th of December. Captain Knowles and his tanks stayed in the area conducting further patrols, during which he was shot by a sniper and had to be evacuated. Captain Knowles and Major Smith both received the Military Cross for their conspicuous gallantry, while Sergeant Ross Clark received the Military Medal. Most notably, though, Captain Paul Triquet of the Van Dews received the Victoria Cross, the highest military award in the British Empire, for his unwavering strength, leadership, and determination in holding Casa Berardi against overwhelming odds. The farmhouse at Casa Berardi still stands today, with a special plaque recognizing Captain Triquet's valor and a memorial for the soldiers who fell in its liberation.
And that was the Battle of Casa Berardi. In at least my opinion as a military history professional, Ortona is of course a big follow-up battle that happens within a narrow time span following Casa Berardi, but it's a bit of a shame that Casa Berardi somewhat gets overshadowed by that almost equally intense battle that's happening within the city limits itself, because this was extremely pivotal to the Battle of Ortona, and it's possible that Ortona could have been far worse had Casa Berardi not been held. And we owe a great debt of gratitude to those personnel of the Van Dews and the Ontarios for their service and sacrifices that day. Thank you very much for joining us this morning at the Canadian Tank Museum for this reenactment of the Battle of Casa Berardi. Stay tuned with us this afternoon for another reenactment on the Gulf War. And in the meantime, please go for a ride, visit our gift shop, check out our exhibits. And in doing so, I'd like to mention you also have access to a free audio guide app. Search the Canadian Tank Museum app on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Download it, and you can scan the QR codes affixed to our exhibits and vehicles to hear fascinating stories about them and their history. And thanks very much to All About Web Services for their support in making that possible. My name's Sam Richardson. Thank you very much for joining us at Aquino Tank Weekend this morning.
Yeah.